This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Quarter-century in prison for a sexual assault in East Harlem that he didn't commit. And even though he's been free from prison since 2009, today he was finally freed from those charges. Here's Eyewitness News reporter Mike Marza.
Wearing a suit, not shackles.
I'm really gonna have my life back. That's it. You know me?
Rafael Ruiz heard the words he's waited 36 years to hear.
The court is granting the motion to vacate and dismiss indictment 3171 of 1984.
His family, overcome with emotion, packing a courtroom, the setting of their nightmares, now the scene of their dreams.
Now I can tell the world that my brother is not charged of all the crimes that your people said he was.
A jury convicted Rafael in a 1984 rape of an 18-year-old woman in East Harlem. Prosecutors offered plea deals, 1, 3, 5 years. He refused.
No, I didn't want to take no deal because I'm not a criminal.
He served his full 25-year sentence and was released in 2009. The Innocence Project has worked 13 years to clear his record, tracking down a DNA kit that eventually cleared him.
For somebody to endure the way that Rafael did and survive what he has endured, as the judge said, with dignity, is really just a triumph of the human spirit.
Rafael was just 24 years old when police arrested him. His mom died of cancer while he was locked up. He was allowed to share this moment before she passed. He turned 61 this summer.
I had a little hobby for myself. I should be an actual painter. Good luck.
Now he's using his hands to try to get a grip on his next chapter. After almost 4 decades, this former painter's canvas is finally blank.
So what are you going to do now?
Me, I guess I'm going to try to look for a wife to get married and have a kid. You know what I mean?
Staying positive through it all. And the DA's office actually partnered with the Innocence Project, saying the job of a prosecutor is not only to seek convictions, but justice. In Lower Manhattan, Mike Marza, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
A celebration today for Ricky Davis, who served more than 13 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit.
Well, this case came to us, as many of our cases do, with a letter from the client saying, I'm innocent and I didn't do this.
The Innocence Project researched the case and found that Ricky Davis's DNA didn't match the genetic markers found on the body of Jane Hilton, who was stabbed to death in 1985 while living in Davis's home.
After we got the initial DNA results in 2014, the crime lab said, let's treat this like we got it yesterday and test more. And they did.
And after years of testing, Ricky Davis was finally cleared by the DA and set free today. It's the 29th time the Innocence Project has exonerated someone who's been wrongly convicted of a crime.
We're hoping that Ricky can, with this vindication, find some peace and some happiness and live his best life.
Ricky Davis's future plans are unclear, but for now he's taking in the fact that his new life begins now.
Today, a Bay Area man who has been in prison for nearly 37 years for rape and murder is expected to be released after wrongly being convicted. The Hillsborough State Attorney says new evidence proves that he's innocent. ABC Action News reporter Larissa Scott explains why officials are now focusing on 2 other suspects.
Yesterday, Hillsborough State Attorney Andrew Warren filed a motion to free Robert Dubois. Warren says Dubois was wrongfully convicted based on newly discovered evidence that was originally thought to be lost, and it's now pointing authorities to 2 other men. For the past 11 months, the Conviction Review Unit of the State Attorney's Office and the Innocence Project have investigated Robert Dubois' case. Dubois, now 55, was 19 when he was arrested for raping and killing 19-year-old Barbara Grams. Back then, Prosecutors said he left her body behind a dentist's office on North Boulevard. Forensic DNA testing was not advanced enough in 1983 for use in prosecution, so rape kit samples were collected and stored away. That evidence was thought to be destroyed in 1990, but earlier this month, officials were able to find rape kit samples that were not used during trial and sent them for DNA testing. Warren says the results exonerated Dubois and pointed to 2 other men. One of those men has been identified and is a person of interest in an ongoing investigation.
For 37 years, we've had an innocent man locked up for a crime that he did not commit.
A court hearing to release Dubois is set for 8:30 this morning, and if granted, he could walk out of prison as early as this afternoon. We'll be there, and we'll keep you updated on our free ABC Action News mobile app. Reporting from Tampa, Larissa Scott, ABC Action News.
They will never, ever lock me up again.
That's right. That's right. Ronnie Long. His name finally cleared of a crime he says he never committed. Thursday evening, Long walked out of the Albemarle Correctional Institution a free man. His wife was waiting for him in the prison parking lot before the pair crossed the street to greet a crowd of supporters.
What's happening, bro? It's overwhelming. Like, I'm filled with joy, goosebumps. I mean, there's not enough adjectives to describe this moment.
It's a moment that's been building for 44 years. In 1976, Long was convicted of raping a woman in Concord. He's maintained his innocence for decades, saying he never had a fair trial. Long's attorneys say investigators withheld evidence. This week, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit ruled that Long's due process rights were violated.
So, right now it's just about enjoying this moment, enjoying the day, and as he said, he's going to get a great meal and just enjoy his freedom, his newfound freedom.
Freedom that offers him the chance to build relationships he says were robbed of him by the state.
So I got some great grandkids, great nieces and nephews that I got to go spend some time with. I got some people that done died, you understand, saying, on this journey that I got to go spend some time with.
Just a few weeks before Long's conviction was overturned, his mother passed away.
Hopefully she's watching down over me.
She is.
Hopefully, you understand, saying, she can tell my dad and my sisters that I made it out.
Ronnie says it's been a long road, and he's glad it's over with.
I always believe that, you understand, saying, no matter how difficult this thing has become, one day I will be standing where I'm standing right now, and I ain't never gave up that hope.
Allison Smith, Fox 8 News.
A Philadelphia man sentenced to life in prison in 2009 for killing his friend is free this morning. Dante Patterson was exonerated yesterday after an extraordinary court motion from Philadelphia's district attorney. He asserted Patterson's conviction was, quote, an egregious example of police and prosecutorial misconduct. Michelle Miller spoke with the 29-year-old who always insisted he was innocent. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. He did indeed. Well, the case is stirring up controversy between Philadelphia's new DA and the former prosecutor who secured Patterson's conviction. Patterson had been on house arrest since March after his conviction was vacated. And today, he's a free man.
Crack that smile, man. I know, man. It's feel good. You free, man.
Dante Patterson ran into a childhood friend as he was about to have the monitoring device on his ankle removed. Did you feel like you were still behind bars?
Definitely.
One of the first things he did, pick up his 11-year-old daughter at her bus stop. You've seen her grow up without being with her. What kind of pain did that bring to you?
A lot. There's days I cry.
A judge dropped all charges against Patterson at the request of newly installed district attorney Larry Krasner.
We were able to show the prosecutor in this matter there was a lot of evidence that they had not considered or seen.
Patterson was arrested in 2007 for the murder of his friend, Antwine Jackson. His first trial in 2008 ended in a hung jury. He was convicted at a retrial in 2009. The DA's office claimed this week that although Patterson was tried twice, neither jury heard the truth, adding the prosecution and police did not turn over strong evidence in their possession that identified the likely perpetrator. The motion says another unnamed suspect was killed just a few months after Jackson's murder.
I think Antwine Jackson's killer was released today.
Retired prosecutor Richard Sachs handled Patterson's second trial.
I resent that they said I withheld evidence, because I did not, and never have, and never been shown to or established by any court that I have. So that's nonsense.
Marissa Bluestein is the executive director of the Pennsylvania Innocence Project, which has been working on Patterson's case for the last 4 years.
That prosecutor has always seen this case through the lens of Dante Patterson is guilty. And he is caught up in that narrative, and that narrative is very tight to him.
You can't get these 11 years back. How do you move on?
Take it day by day, step by step. You know, just gotta stay strong.
And this is the latest case in Pennsylvania where someone who spent years behind bars was cleared. Rapper Meek Mill was freed just last month. DA Harry Krasner has campaigned as a reformer who described the city's district attorney's office as hell-bent on winning cases at any cost. Now, in this country, last year, 139 people were exonerated, 171 the year before that. That's on average about 3 every week. So this really gives weight to people who say the system is broken and something needs to be done.
And the impact it has on so many family members, too.
You see it right there.
Yeah. You know, you think about the Innocence Project, those people who dedicate their lives to these cases. Were they not there, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. You have all kinds of innocence projects all over this country with different missions. Some that look at it from the DNA process, others who look at it from the technicality process, as with Erin Moriarty's piece just earlier this week.
Michelle, thank you.
Welcome to another summer season episode of True Crime XS.
It's an interesting case for a couple of reasons. I bet the issue I have with it is not the same as yours, but I do want to talk about it because I can drop in audio of this, which is that's what's interesting. There's so much available about this case for it to be, and I'm not saying this towards the victims, for this case to be where it is and what it is, there's too much available on it because these cases have not been properly adjudicated.
Well, that's the understatement of the century.
There is no reason for Oxygen to have as much material on these cases as they do. It makes no sense.
Okay, so my comment on that is I'm having trouble wrapping my head around the entire case. And this is not my realm of anything, really. It's not a missing person. It's not even a missing perpetrator. It's a case where decided to try one person twice, and it's resulted in mistrials both times. They put so much work into it. Like you said, there's so much information. And so I'm sitting there and thinking to myself, what's wrong with this situation? Why is this very obvious thing not being addressed? And so then I get to where I'm like, well, are they purposefully, did they go too far down the path with this one guy? And their pride won't allow them to turn around? Or do they really not see it? And I don't know. Do you understand? Do you follow what I'm saying? We haven't talked about this case at all, except just briefly. Have you heard about this case? And so we have. I don't know if you even have any idea what I'm talking about.
So first of all, this is in the South, and this is one of those cases that somehow, God willing, a black man is being tried in both Louisiana and Mississippi for murdering young girls. And that is the worst situation for him to be in because one of them's a Louisiana case and the other one's a Mississippi case.
Right. And
it's terrible. If he hit the trifecta, it would basically be he'd been to Alabama and somebody saw him somewhere doing something in Alabama. That is the only thing. So Louisiana, first of all, I have spent a lot of time in Louisiana going over Louisiana cases over the last 10 years that have nothing to do with missing persons. They have nothing to do with missing perpetrators. And I've had both results from the research I've done and the work that I've done related to those. I have found cases where somebody thought someone was innocent, and I have dug and I have dug and I have done months of work only to accidentally prove they were not innocent at all. And then the other side, I found cases that they should be slam dunks. And when you start digging, it doesn't really make sense.
That's what one of the things about this case is. It's intriguing. Like, even like I don't look into this type of case. I'm more of a missing persons type, and I guess serial killer sort of by default, because you want to find the victims and they're typically missing people. But this is not my kind of case at all. And for some reason, I can't walk away from it. Like, I can't, like, I've been really obsessing over it.
Well, so I want to address something like up front. What happened in this case was horrible. Like, what was done to the victim in this case was absolutely unspeakable crime. And that part, like, you and I both come from that perspective first. But
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But the second step is they then compound it by essentially getting a defendant on the hook who, for some reason or another, so the cases that I've looked at Thompson down there very carefully, and that won't be one that you're familiar with, but it's Connick versus Thompson. It's like a big deal.
I actually do know about that case.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was, because it's not.
I'd
it's
be
not one
surprised. Well, I know, but it's Harry Connick Jr.'s father.
Right. Yeah. So that one, and then the other one that I was heavily invested in, that's Curtis Kiles. I was heavily invested in the case of Curtis Kiles because it didn't happen to him once; it happened to him twice. And unfortunately, I can't comment on like the outcome of all that because it's still pending. It doesn't really matter at the point that it's at, that case is at, because it doesn't matter if he did it or not. The way that it went through the system is the problem.
Right. Okay. So, yes, because they've just put him through the ringer.
Well, so I started reading this at your behest, and the way that works for me is I read a lot really quickly, like a lot of information. And I read, so the first thing I did was I dug up his criminal background, and then I read through the background of, I didn't have the benefit of like finding this case first. The way that you said it to me, I went and started like looking for the parties involved. And what I came across first was the other case, which is a foreign exchange student. And so in some ways, they kind of got him over a barrel in that case because he is definitely on the hook for device access fraud. And he does have like a criminal record that like sort of lends itself to the theft portion of that case. But just reading it, you can't avoid the links between the cases. And you also can't avoid there's a lot of family activity and loved one activity on the case of the young girl who was burnt alive on social media. So when
right, and I have not even dreamt of looking at any of that.
Well, so I did.
And I won't.
The reason that I did was because the cops are involved in the social media. I started thinking about this, and it really bothers me. First of all, the way that the juries have been treated in this case is horrendous. The way that instructions have been offered, the things that have been said to them, the things that have been done. I cannot even think of how in the world like this is allowed to happen in the United States of America in the year 2013 and on is crazy to me. It's draconian in the way that it's unfolded.
I have been informed that the jury has reached a verdict in this case. My standard admonishment to the spectators in the courtroom is that there absolutely be no outburst of any kind from anyone. There will certainly be no displays of emotion or anything of that nature. If it is, you will be promptly removed from the courtroom and further proceedings, and you will face the penalty of contempt. So please remember this is a court of law, and I would expect you to to dignify that as best you can. I understand that this has been a very emotional time for families and loved ones in this case. I understand all that very perfectly. This court has a heart like any other person, and I understand both sides, both families that are involved and friends. I understand all of that. At the same time, I'm going to ask you and remind you to dignify these court proceedings accordingly. All right, if you bring the jury in, please. I've been told that the jury's reached a verdict. Is that correct? Did you all select a foreman? All right, sir. Let's see. Mr. Lampkin, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. I don't need to know what your verdict was, but I just need to know, did all 12 jurors agree on that verdict?
Yes, sir, we did.
All right. Would you hand the verdict, please, to the court, to the clerk? Excuse me.
We all didn't agree on it.
Sir?
You said we all agreed on that verdict. We didn't.
All 12. The verdict has to be unanimous. So all 12 did not agree on the verdict? Is that what you're telling me, sir?
Yeah, I didn't agree either, sir.
All right. I'd ask you to step back in the jury room, please. Pass the verdict, please, to the clerk that you have in your hand. Give them the jury instruction back. All right, court will meet with counsel in chambers.
And I tracked down all that audio, and they come in, they go out, they come in, they go out. This happens, these trials take weeks sometimes, and sometimes they take days, but this is at the very end. They've been given their instructions, they've gone out, they come back. So that's what we're hearing in these clips. Even though we're hearing them in clips, some of these things take place days apart. It's really frustrating to listen to what's going on with the jury. And I don't know if people will understand, because you have to cut out these hours-long pauses, but ultimately, no matter what time it's occurring, like in the land of an audience listening to it, it's been cut down. This took place over a long period of time.
All right, bring the jury in, please. All right, once again, I've been informed that the jury has reached a verdict. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And now I need to ask you if that verdict represents the considered judgment of all 12 jurors. In other words, is it unanimous?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, has that verdict been recorded on a separate sheet of paper?
Yes, Your Honor.
Or would you pass it to the clerk, please? Clerk, please read the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Quentin Verdell Tellis, not guilty of capital murder.
Right. Any request of counsel?
Yes, sir. Request the jury be polled.
All right. I need to know this. Thank you. It's been requested that the jury be polled. In other words, I'm going to start down here. I'm going to ask each one of you if that is your verdict. You just need to tell me yes or no. Okay? All right. Ms. Martin?
Not guilty.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Madison?
Not guilty.
McGee?
Guilty. I'm sorry.
Mr. Lampkin?
Guilty.
Mr. Johnson?
Jackson.
Jackson? I'm sorry. It says Johnson. All right, Mr. Johnson. All right, thank you. Ms. Felder?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Goss? Ms. Boyd? Is that a yes, ma'am? All right. Mr. Jones?
Guilty.
Mr. Coleman?
Guilty.
Mr. McKinley?
Guilty.
Mr. Bullock? Ms. Bullock, excuse me. All right.
I'm way misunderstanding here.
I can't, I was having trouble hearing. All right. You may approach.
So they go to publish a not guilty verdict, and I think it's the prosecuting attorney requests that they poll the jury, and then they start going down the line and they're polling the jury. There's a space between the jurors and the judge, so he can't hear everything they're saying like clearly. But basically, what happens is the jury is not unanimous after saying they were unanimous, and they're about to publish this not guilty verdict. But several of them are saying that they voted guilty. So the attorneys in the courtroom are like, "What is going on?" So this isn't the first time. This is the second time that's happened in the same setup.
It's very important we understand what your response is. And so I'm going to ask you to speak loudly so that I can hear you. The verdict that I have recorded here is we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. So I'm going to ask you, Ms. Gauze, is not guilty your verdict?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Boyd.
Are you asking?
I'm asking you if you voted not guilty.
I voted guilty.
You voted guilty. All right. Mr. Jones.
I voted guilty.
All right. Mr. Coleman.
I voted guilty.
All right. Mr. McKinley.
I voted guilty.
Ms. Bullock.
I voted guilty.
All right. Ms. Martin.
Not guilty.
All right. Ms. Madison.
I voted guilty.
All right. Mr. McGee.
Not guilty.
Mr. Lampkin.
Guilty.
Mr. Johnson.
Jackson. Not guilty.
Ms. Felder. All right. May I see the jury instructions, please? It is very important that you all try again to reach a verdict, all right? Obviously, there's a split between you all as to the verdict in this case. I'm going to read you the instruction again. Give you some more time to deliberate. I don't know why the verdict was recorded as it was, but at any rate, I'm going to ask you to go back, consider your verdict, deliberate, and please record your verdict accurately, all right? I know that it is possible for honest men and women to have honest different opinions about the facts of a case, but if it is possible to reconcile your differences of opinion and decide this case, then you should do so. Accordingly, I remind you that the court originally instructed you that the verdict of the jury must represent the considered judgment of each juror. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate in view of reaching an agreement if you can do so without violence to your individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own views and change your opinion if you are convinced it is erroneous. But do not surrender your honest convictions as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. Please continue your deliberations. You may approach. Direct violation of my court order, that person will be arrested and that person will face the maximum penalty that I am capable of inflicting. Ma'am, fair warning. You get caught, you're going to do the time. Got it? All right. Bring the jury in, please. Okay, we have a good evening. Everybody get rested? Okay. I'm going to ask you to return to your jury room and please continue your deliberations. You know that we can communicate by notes, so if you have a note you want to send to me, please send it, give it to the bailiff, and I'll be here waiting for you. All right? So with that, I will send you back to continue your deliberations. All right, we'll be in recess until the jury returns. know from the jury that they are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. They've been deliberating some 7 hours now, and I'm gonna call them in and read them the sharpling charge. Does either side like to see the charge before I read it to the jury? Does anybody want to make an objection for the record? No. All right, bring the jury in, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I received a note saying at this point you were unable to reach a verdict. And I understand that. This has been a long, difficult case. But what I want to do is I'm going to give you another instruction that's been approved by the Supreme Court and let you go back and deliberate some more. All right? Now listen carefully. I'm going to have this instruction sent back there to you when you go back there. I know that it is possible for honest men and women to have honest, different opinions about the facts of a case. But if it is possible to reconcile your differences of opinion and decide this case, then you should do so. Accordingly, I remind you that the court originally instructed you that the verdict of the jury must represent the considered judgment of each juror. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate in view of reaching an agreement, if you can do so without violence to your individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own views and change your opinion if you are convinced it is erroneous. But do not surrender your honest convictions as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purpose of returning a verdict. Please continue your deliberations. Right. All right, we'll be in recess till the jury returns. In order, we're going to stand just for a moment in recess. I may have another jury instruction to read you. All right, so just stay in our seats a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to put you back in your jury room, and I hope it won't be long before I send for you, but I'll send for you as soon as I can. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to read you one more instruction, then I'm going to send you back to your jury room once more. And I want you to consider this instruction along with all the other instructions I've previously given to you. The court instructs the jury that all 12 jurors must agree on the verdict in order to find the defendant guilty. The court instructs the jury that all 12 jurors must agree on the verdict in order to find the defendant not guilty. If you are unable to reach a unanimous verdict as to guilty or not guilty, please advise the court in writing. All right. I will now send you back to your jury room for further deliberations. All right. We're as part of our system of justice, which we all fight jealously to protect and preserve. Every defendant comes in this court is entitled to a jury that's as conscientious as you are about the jury's rights. And I respect your decisions. Your inability to reach a verdict does not mean that you've not done an admirable job, because you have. And this court appreciates it. So with that, I'm going to declare a mistrial in this case, and I want to send you back to your jury room, and we'll be sending you home very shortly. All right, so if you'll retire to the jury room, please. the defendant back to the custody of the North County Sheriff's Department, and this court stands adjourned.
But then I thought about this, and this makes it even crazier, and then I'm going to hand it back to you. But the police officers that are involved, and there's one particular police officer, and I am not naming him. I'm not saying anything about him. I have to keep in the back of my mind that the person who is spearheading this makes $40,000 a year, hoping that one day they will have a government pension. Because the perspective on it, if you don't look at it that way, is disturbing, because in my opinion, totally armchairing this from a very far distance, everything is laying there. All of the pieces are there. I would not want this guy to put together my 1,000-piece puzzle with me, because it would not look like the picture on the box.
Okay. So, that confirms, because I have not gone into social media except for, like, I think you sent me like a couple little screenshot blurbs, and I did read those, but because I don't care. I mean, honestly, all of the circumstances surrounding this case, I don't care what any of those people have to say, and it's not a knock towards them, but if it was, so I'm this case is making me question my own judgment skills. Like, I'm going, are they serious here? Because it is very clear to me that they got tunnel vision. It's going the wrong direction. And I do not look into, I don't speculate too much on like murders that have had people convicted of things. And, you know, I don't like to delve into that kind of stuff, because it's sickening most of the time that, you know, how it ends up happening. Now, it just so happens there have been 2 mistrials in this case, but the man is not convicted of it. And one of the sort of best parts of this case, and I just want to, this will help why I don't really care what social media has to say about this. Okay, so this case was in a small town, and they had to essentially pull juries from a different county, like quite a ways away, and bust them in, and the jury was sequestered, and so they had to stay for a couple of weeks. I am actually not sure how long the trial lasted. However, I think that you could go a really long time and watch a lot of trials and not see something like that happen.
Well, maybe. The other case, okay, so just addressing this one before I go back to anything else, I don't think you can, as a prosecutor, I don't think you can prosecute this case. I don't think a prosecutor can prosecute this case, because there is automatic reasonable doubt. You and I have been debating this. We think the cops are just wanting to do what they want to do, and the prosecutors have tried to find a way around it. I
want to say, though, I don't know that they're doing I don't know what's happening. I just want to make that clear. You said you and I think the cops are doing what they want to do, but, like, are they doing what they want to do, or do they, like, legitimately think they're right?
Well, no, I mean, I think now that we're moving into trial number 3, and it's been covered by Oxygen, because that's the way you taint a jury pool, I think we're allowed to talk about it this way. And that is, we feel like some piece is missing from this puzzle. The reasonable doubt that I'm talking about is multiple people who are affiliated with this case, particularly a single first responder for sure, heard the victim say a name that is not the defendant's name. And
correct. And actually, they testified to it, and they brought out the records of the incident, and they testified to that. And there was multiple people on the stand testifying to that fact. They said, you know, who did this to you? And she named a person that was not the defendant.
Right.
And it was just a first name. And there's been a lot of arguments back and forth, bringing in doctors saying she couldn't have possibly known what she was saying, but she had given them her name. She had told them she was set on fire. So she had some coherence. Now, these are multiple first responders who were there, who have, you know, it's a small town, but they had no affiliation with her. She was
right.
a young adult. They have no reason to lie. And it spanned across several people's testimony. And my understanding is they had 18 witnesses. They didn't all testify, but they had 18 people available, lined up, or even if they didn't want to testify, like they had knowledge of the fact that she made that statement.
So you mentioned that they bring in a doctor who basically said it would have been impossible for her to articulate real things, but she knew who she was.
Correct.
The prosecution did something in the course of this that the defense was going to call him out on, and for some reason, everybody decided not to.
Well, Richard, we have stunning new developments in the Jessica Chambers murder case. Chambers was found burning alive back in December 2014 in Panola County, Mississippi. Quentin Tellis is charged with her murder, and the defense attorney claims the prosecutor tried to pressure a potential witness and wants him thrown off the case. Local 24's Tish Clark is live in the control room tonight, and you know what, Tish? These are some pretty serious allegations.
Yeah, definitely, Katina, they are. A motion filed by defense attorney Darla Palmer accuses District Attorney John Champion of secretly meeting with one of her clients, Jalen Caudle, at the DeSoto County Jail back in April. Caudle is charged with capital murder in a different case. He and Quentin Tellis met while they were in jail. Palmer claims District Attorney Champion met with Caudle privately at the jail in April and tried to intimidate him regarding the Chambers case. Now, depending on the outcome of a hearing set for Monday morning, this could change the entire course of Tellis's retrial set for September.
The allegations are extremely serious because they not only affect legal concerns and whether the Constitution is being violated, but they implicate ethical concerns.
We reached out to Palmer's office, but we haven't heard back at this hour. Champion said he can't get into details, but told us there are two sides to every court filing, and he'll have an opportunity to testify under oath about what the real facts are. The hearing is set for Monday morning in Sardis, Mississippi. Now, what this could mean for both sides, that's part of the story is coming up tonight at 6 o'clock. For now, live in the control room tonight, Tish Clark, Local 24 News.
And depending on how you read it, it either seems like a discovery, like the prosecution found out about it, or the prosecution attempted to set it up. And that is, they went after essentially a cellmate, a colleague in jail, whatever you want to call them. Someone who was in jail at the same time as the defendant.
That is new. That is a new one. A colleague in jail. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't. So the way I was looking at the way they have everything set up there. By the way, this kid shows up. The defendant shows up in other cases along the way. If you go and read there, he is.
I'm well aware of it, and I do have a very. Okay, for one thing, I just want to say I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. Okay, and I'll be the first to say I was wrong, but I don't think I am. And I think the really bad thing about this is I'm pretty sure he's being set up by the same person over and over again.
So these two kids, okay, if you go back all the way to 2011, these two names keep showing up. And so the idea is that the woman either said Eric or Derek. And there are lots of Erics and Dereks like orbiting around these cases. There is one particular Eric.
Are there really lots of them though? Because I don't see it that way.
15 interviews for Erics and Dereks directly affiliated with either the victim or the defendant. 15 Erics and Dereks. And the court
but
cases
none of
that
them are on trial.
The court cases I was reading last night are other Dereks who are not affiliated with this at all. They're There was a sex offender Derek. There is another Derek that, like, basically the defendant in this case had turned in for something. But so all of this sort of hinges on that other case, the foreign exchange student case. They decided he was guilty for that. And the reason was his story of where he got the debit card makes no sense. Now, the way that story read, because he gives them 3 versions of how he got this girl's debit card. It starts out with a drug dealer named Jay, and then this other Eric, who in all the paperwork prior to this trial hung out a lot with the defendant. That's what it says. And it's not like it's people that have no dog in the fight saying that they hung out a lot. That's what I was sending you was from the other case, the other warrants, where Eric and this defendant hang out quite a bit, and he's affiliated with their family. And what I think is happening is I think the defendant is lying in the other case. He took the woman's card. He used the card. He got cash. But I believe a man named Eric gave it to him. Don't you turn me in. So he made up other shit. Well, Eric gets called in and questioned about it, and he dines out another guy. He blames it on a guy named Lemon. We've got these multiple orbiting Erics and Dereks, but only one of them stands out. And
and honestly, it is said when he's not doing whatever, he's with that guy.
He's with the defendant. He's hanging with the defendant, and that's what he is known to be doing. The defendant.
What is the deal?
The defendant's story makes sense to me because I think the defendant is like Forrest Gump.
Okay, yes, and that's what I was going to say. There has been a lot of attention brought to his, he was interviewed 5 times. 3 of those, I guess, interrogated 5 times, and because he was in custody. And 3 of those interrogations are on video. Now, what they have kind of said, oh, you know, your story's changed and you're being deceitful and you're lying, I feel like is confusion. And that's from watching like him being interrogated by these investigators. It's very telling to me what he gets upset about and like sort of how he's not trying to pull a fast one on anybody, that's for sure. I feel like some of the things they have pointed out and said, oh, you know, you're lying, your story's changed. I think he's like, well, I have no idea. And so I'm just like, he's trying to give them answers. And he is, I think, like you said, his IQ is probably below average. And there's no question that I believe he dropped out of school in 8th grade. So he's not educated. I don't feel like that should be used against him. And like, it's literally one of the saddest things that I've ever seen go down.
Well, so with him, and I agree with everything you just said, but with him, I feel like his stories are a mixture of truth and somebody said they'd kill me if I told anybody. Like
I don't think that. I don't think that. Here's what I think. I think he's completely unaware that his bud, I don't know what to call him,
his future co-defendant, hopefully.
I think he's I don't think he's put it together. I don't think anybody in the family has put it together. I don't think anybody, because why would they do this if they really honestly had put those 2 things together? Now, of course, there's the other side of that, which if I hadn't seen so much like for myself and digested it for myself, I would probably take the stance that, well, clearly it's so obvious that if they didn't go that way, they must have some smoking gun that would explain this. However, I have watched, read, and in excruciating detail those trials, and that is not the case. Well, they do not have anything that would suggest that there's a smoking gun indicating that.
On either side. Neither side has it.
The way that it's presented in several instances, different things, the questions that are asked, the way they're asked, and the way that they're responded to, I think has caused the jury to be very confused about more than just whether or not they all have to agree that he's both guilty or not guilty.
I agree with you. And I think that the way out of this is a competent defense attorney at the next trial having a serious forensic psych evaluation look at that defendant for signs of autism or signs of intellectual defect. Because I say it because I noticed in some of the interrogations that, like, I'm going to pull some pieces of that for people to understand what I'm talking about. But I noticed that, like, he's very complacent and then defiant, complacent, defiant. And he doesn't really seem to realize he's doing it. It's like it's just whatever he thinks in that moment, he says it. And it's not really incriminating as much as it is nonsensical.
Right. And so that is, I think, part of what is caused. I am very confused about like a bunch of, I see the case. I see the case for what it is. I see, what has happened. I can see it very clearly. My confusion lies in, authorities and then like the legal system and like what's happening on that side of it, because what are they doing? I'm not entirely sure that they know what they're doing. And so then I start wondering, well, am I wrong? But I don't feel like I am wrong. I feel like it's pretty clear. And I do feel like, I don't know that a psych evaluation would help. I feel like they could try him a million times. And it is really hard to convince a jury when you've got so many witnesses testifying to the fact that when they said, honey, who did this to you? She said, Eric, that they are going to find a man named Quentin guilty of it.
Right. And,
it's insurmountable. And for the prosecutor to sit there and say, we can overcome that. I mean, seriously?
That's reasonable doubt. And like, no matter what position I'm in, unless I like get on my sneaky prosecutor horse and I figure out some way to get that disqualified, which you can't because it's a foundation for the scene.
I would like to go back to something you started talking about. And so there was a jail colleague of Quentin's who came forward. And when he came forward, what he said was, now, they did do something about this. This was heard in it was a motion for, they were trying to have the prosecutor, they were trying to get him off the case because jail acquaintance said, the prosecutor approached him and said, how about you testify that when Quentin first met Jessica, he told her that his name was Eric.
It was a pet name. I was like, what the hell?
And for that, I will help you out. Now, instead of doing that, which is very interesting, instead of doing that, the young black man who was a jail colleague of the defendant, in this case Quentin, he went in and said, hey, like he told the defense attorneys and he testified on the stand that, that's what happened. And the judge, like right there on the spot, said, I don't believe for a second that this prosecutor tried to have you lie.
The judge wasn't even wrapping his head around that because there's no reason not to take that deal.
Exactly. What reason would that kid have to come in there and accuse him of it? Now, okay, granted, it was brought by the defendant's attorneys. The defendant, Quentin's attorneys, brought the motion for him to be removed from the case based on the jail colleague's statement that the prosecutor tried to get him to tell the jury at the next trial that when he first met Jessica, he had told her his name was Eric. Now, okay, instead of like putting together the obvious pieces here, which are the fact that is the insurmountable reasonable doubt, okay, right there. The judge says, like, basically, the young man who came forward is a liar. The prosecutor, did not do that. It's, and at the very best, it was a misunderstanding. And at the very worst, it was a misunderstanding. And so it's mind blowing, because I think it's far less likely for a jail colleague to come forward with nothing. He got nothing for that, except basically you're a liar from the judge. Okay.
Oh, well, his next case is not going to go well with the prosecutor's office.
Right? Okay. So in my mind, I'm going, how could that be seen that way? But so the prosecutor was in this area, this prosecutor is a prosecutor for multiple counties. Like, it's so small there.
Right.
He has a wide
district. His judicial district is huge.
Respected. He's a respected prosecutor. I don't know him. From what I've seen, I feel like he's driven.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the right direction, but
I'm torn, but yeah.
I mean, he's driven. Now, okay, so if it was my child in this position, either position, I would want a prosecutor willing to try somebody 3 or 4 times. But I think I would hope that I would say, how about if we put, Eric on trial?
Well, so that's okay. I like to think, okay, these people are doing their jobs. These people are humans. So I have a lot of faith in parts of the system, but I'm also, by my own experiences, extraordinarily aware of people's agendas and their career agendas and their personal feelings about stuff, like tripping up investigations and making things just out to be something they're not. And I cannot for the life of me understand how they have zeroed in on this guy who looks like an accomplice to some degree in one murder, maybe unaware of the exchange student murder.
That's what I think. I think when he finds out, like, your friend did this, he's going to be genuinely surprised.
Oh, probably, yeah. And the other part of it is I saw a cop on Facebook swear they had ruled that particular person out. And I was like, okay, so if I was that police officer, and again, I'm trying to keep in my mind, like, he's doing his job. He's a human. But part of that job is not to go on Facebook and make bold statements like that, because there are lots of ways around that with the way this investigation has gone so far. I do not believe for a second that they definitively ruled out that guy, because... But
somebody said they did, and I think everybody went along with it. Could that be what this massive confusion pile-up is from?
It's interesting because it's their own argument biting in the ass. Because what they think happened is that one person misheard the word Eric, and even the victim's mom came out and said that she thinks that her theory of what the words were was a wreck, like that there was a wreck because the girl basically woke up in the car and smelled the gasoline and saw the fire, and she thought she had a wreck. And so but her idea is that when a wreck was said by her to the first responder, he heard Eric, and then everyone else heard Eric after that. But what's interesting is the prosecutor does not seem to be hearing Eric, and neither does the
I know. He just went really...
And the thing that bothered me about it, though, and the thing that makes it like a thing that has to be assailed by a defense team, is when you go in and you write your affidavits, and your affidavits contradict themselves by saying such and such and such and such told me that this defendant is regularly hanging out with Eric. But then you go on Facebook and you say, oh, I ruled him out. Well, okay, I'm pretty sure they were both involved in the other murder in Louisiana. So how are you ruling him out in Mississippi? And like one of the rule outs in a different pretty good suspect was a sex offender with, one of those names who had been rubbing his mom's feet. And I'm like, you guys did not investigate this. If that's what you put down, I'm not saying that guy did it. I'm just saying if that's the extent at which was it on Facebook Live or something that he's rubbing his mom's feet? Like, is that how you know it's true? Because so here's what I decided. I think Quentin's stories, some of the bits and pieces he's telling about his interactions with the victim, I think some of them are true. And even if they're not literally the victim, like he was interacting with some girl the way he says he was. And I think that his description of how she got in that field and was in the position she was in before the car got set on fire, that makes sense to me for it to have probably occurred. And then
with the other guy.
Someone named Eric came along, either was that person that night or decided that he didn't like Quentin hooking up with that girl and for some reason decided he was going to set her on fire. And none of it makes sense, but even the original story didn't make sense. So why are we stopping there?
Right. No, I agree with you 1,000%. So, okay, my hope was they have, a defendant not named Eric or Derek or anything to that effect. They've got a good reason why they don't. Okay. That wasn't the case. And then, okay, fine, a wreck. That actually is, that's her mother drawing a logical conclusion, I think. However, everybody, nobody got that. I mean, we're not talking about one or two people here. 18 people heard it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because dying declarations have huge amounts of weight in court. Dying declarations are frequently used to circumvent hearsay. They have a very, very heavy weight when they seem to relate to the case. But in this case, the most likely candidate that people question about on the internet is named Eric, is named in the other cases affidavit. And they're saying that there is, and by the way, what's really interesting about that is, so the page itself is for one victim. The affidavit they've posted is for the other victim. The cases are in separate jurisdictions in separate states. But the police officer claiming authority is not on the case. He's on the other case. Does that make sense?
Right.
So there's a
how
young
did
white
they
girl,
rule him out then?
Right.
Oh my gosh. So they're depending on that? They're going by
And if I were him, I would have stayed the fuck out of it because he's going to hurt their case. And
I looked. So I was looking on my phone at thank you for sending me all those screenshots, but they're really hard to read on my phone, and so I haven't gotten all the way through. But that is very interesting because in this case, I would believe that how I could believe what you just said.
I looked at it and I was like, this is the biggest CYA I've ever read on Facebook.
Okay, so do you think that that's what's happening?
I don't know for sure, but like I said, if you've got these people. First of all, the affidavit is incredibly detailed. It's a lot of investigative work. There's a lot of work there. And so before I had read that, I had read other things about this officer and another officer, and then I had read about all the parties, on the defendant side, and I also had read about the victim, not from the perspective of the stuff that Oxygen puts out, or from the perspective, I went through court documents after court documents, and I can share whatever you'd like to see. But starting in 2011, these guys end up named in the same appellate cases. Do you know what I mean? I use the appellate cases because in the appellate cases, they outline the whole thing, and I know what to go looking. Basically, I can get a glancing overview from reading an 80-page appellate document. I get a pretty good idea of what the court is dealing with. And I'm not referencing this case because it's not there. It's not been adjudicated yet. What's going on with these guys is linked going all the way back to 2011, 2012, where other people named Derek and Eric are blaming this defendant and Eric for other things. And they show up as informants in those cases. So
correct. And so basically, if Quentin had other friends, he would not be in this situation.
Exactly. And that's the thing that was sort of the last thing I presented before I went to bed last night because I was so tired of reading all this stuff. I've read. And I got to the end of it and I was like, this feels like murder roulette. Like, it's his turn. We'll get the next one.
Well, okay, so, and that's one of the things that I start questioning my own judgment, because to me it's so apparent in this particular case. Now, I have found that, and this is just an observation, it's not a judgment. The players in the judicial system, they don't, sometimes it's hard to believe somebody's life is on the line as far as the prosecutor acts or the defense attorney acts or the judge acts or the witnesses act. Sometimes it's really hard to believe that, like, they're working, that what is at stake is actually at stake. Because, like, is it a case where, like, the prosecutor's gone through the motions this far, and so because it's his job to prosecute things, he goes all the way through it? Or does he realize that, or does he realize it and he's continuing because that's his job? Or is it pride? Like, I put this out there, I can't back down now. Or does he legitimately not see it? I feel like a lot of times you can be too close to something. And so that was resonating in my mind. Like, they've got this, I don't know what the motivation for continuing on this path would be. Is it that, because you've got person after person after person saying, I'm 100% sure he did it. I'm 100% sure he did it. I'm 100% sure he did it. And everybody is ignoring the fact that she said Eric made up, other things in their minds. They've given other reasons for what she said or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, for one thing, you're talking about first responders who, even on the stand, they were emotional, recalling what they went through because of this case. And in their testimony, you could tell they knew that these were, some of her last words. They knew she was dying. They knew she was not going to make it. I believe that they were paying attention. I feel like it was asked knowing it was a dying declaration. I don't think it was haphazard. I don't think that any other inferences should be added to or taken away from what she said based on the amount of people that testified to it, that filled out their reports. I mean, I know this case caused like a big, like, people quit being volunteer fire.
It's highly traumatic. Yeah, it's highly traumatic.
And, just going to testify, it was tough on them. So it's like adding insult to injury that they don't believe what they're saying. Like, because, this is the person who was trying to comfort, the victim right before she died. He knew she was dying, and, they were listening hard. I mean, it's not like they're just going to make it up. So, I have trouble with that. But, I don't want to put her family down. Like,
no, not at all. Like,
they can believe what they need to believe. And I have nothing but sympathy or empathy for them, because it's unthinkable. And she did not deserve it, and that nobody deserves what happened to her. To me, this has gone on for years and years and years for the defendant, and I honestly feel like I don't even feel like he was an accomplice, like to the letter of the law accomplice. I feel like he really didn't have anything to do with it, and I feel like his friend that he hung out with all the time, named Eric, I feel like he was getting up on Quentin. I don't know how this all works, because I'm an old married woman. So, but like they had a they had a relationship, a physical relationship, but they weren't boyfriend and girlfriend.
No, they were just hooking up. That was it. Her boyfriend was in prison.
I mean, she was with some guy. It just wasn't Quentin.
Well, that's where, okay, so that's what bothers me the most about this case. It's because there were a lot of pieces of investigation to look at. So she had a boyfriend that was in prison. They chased down whether or not someone affiliated with him might have been a part of it. They looked at, there was a mysterious hitchhiker that got picked up. And that is still one of those threads that hasn't like either unraveled or tied itself off loose ends wise. And then, so this woman picked up a hitchhiker near the scene. And then there was another.
Okay, but that was supposed to be the defendant. In the second trial, they testified to that, but the first responders indicated that there was a middle-aged black man who seemed suspicious. That's not the same person.
No.
Okay.
So that's another person. That guy. His name, I believe, the witness's name is something like Willie Taylor. He's a truck driver or something. He does not seem to be affiliated with the case in any way other than having stopped and seen what was going on. But there was someone who testified about his presence. And then there was, so the hitchhiker is separate of that. And then there's a guy with a couple of gas cans. There was a guy filling up gas cans that they went. I'm just saying, there was investigation done here. It just, for some reason, they ruled out real quick the Eric guy that seems the most obvious to me, at least, and I think to you.
Yes, absolutely. I have no question. Every single thing that Quentin has been charged with, Eric did it.
Yeah, and that's
I don't mean to laugh, but like seriously, nobody's seeing this. Like the family didn't say anything. Like, and I don't even mean to say anything except stating the obvious. That's what I'm doing. I'm stating the obvious.
Right, and that's so just looking at it in an overview, I even sent you, I think, there was like another Eric years earlier, like 2011 or 2012, there was a shopkeeper. And he actually, I think his name was like Tariq.
But he went by Eric.
Yeah, he went by Eric. And I was just like, how many like weird Eric things can this one town have? Because these are all in the same area down there where.
With like 500 people. 500 people live there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've got this really tiny area that's sort of a part of a larger jurisdiction. And like I said, they investigated this. I looked at it. I can see the fruits of their labor. I just think they're wrong on the exchange student. That one cop is, I think the cop is wrong on the exchange student. And I think Quentin was an accomplice from the perspective of he used the debit card in that case. But I think he admitted to basically what he had done, and that's fraudulent use of a device. But I think it was given to him by Eric. So
right, and do you think that he had any idea that it was from a dead girl?
Probably not.
A murdered girl?
Probably not. If he did, it would have been after the fact that he found out about that. Like he would have found out like after he had already done it all, after he had already committed the crime. Because I think he was bringing the money to Eric.
I believe that 100%. I think he was like, "Here you go, bud. Go get some money out of the ATM." She was tortured for her PIN number. Like,
yeah,
that's what the allegation is. And I feel like if he had other friends, I really do think that there's one person behind all of this. And like, you said you can see the investigation. So could I. I could see it. And like every single part of it pointed to this shadow of Quentin's, or maybe Quentin is his shadow. And like, he's there, like for everything. And yet he, Quentin's being taken down for this, but the guy's name is Eric. Yeah. And when asked who did it to her, Jessica Chambers said, Eric. Welcome to the American South. I can't figure out, like, this is truly mind-blowing to me. The jury situation, okay, whatever. I guess it could be a lack of instruction, but I find it hard to believe that everybody in the United States doesn't understand, which I know actually a couple of states, I think that there was an issue up till recently, but like the verdict has to be unanimous. And in the event it's not unanimous, it's a hung jury. It's a mistrial. It's not automatically not guilty. That is a new thing. Even though I like that.
Well, I mean, there were places down around this area. I think Louisiana, till maybe 2019, was not a unanimous verdict state. I don't remember
can't
what
speak to that. The trial that I'm
I will
talking about was
find
in
that.
Mississippi, and
Yeah.
and so so as our justice system works, it was the correct thing for the juror to speak up, because if that verdict had gone through without the juror speaking up, and which I assume that they would poll the jury, and who knows if they would speak up then or not. But in a jury room, and I can speak from experience, in a jury room, there is a lot of bullying that occurs. It never ceases to amaze me. I have been in situations where I had to really break down things and explain them like I'm talking to a 2-year-old in order for people to get like basic concepts. And so I was shocked, and it literally made my jaw drop, and I laughed because of we just we just thought if everybody didn't consider him guilty that he was automatically not guilty. And so that's not how our system works, and it was a good thing the jurors spoke up, and I feel like a jury should decide. That's the whole point. The problem I guess I see here especially is like the misunderstanding of if a witness gives an impression, for example, in this case there is DNA on the keys to the car. One witness testified that the defendant's DNA was not found on the keys. However, when they did the Y chromosome test, he could not be excluded from that test.
Right. They did 2 different types of tests. And
right.
The thing that gets tricky about that is that, okay, so one of the Y chromosome test that they did basically is just a search for males. It's just to prove there's male DNA on it.
Right. And there were 4 different male DNAs.
But the problem with that test is meant to, okay, sometimes you'll hear about mixed DNA results.
Mm-hmm.
This is the test that they do to determine, first of all, like if it's a male-female victim, do you have both of their DNA in there? They start with pull the male out, and that's how they do it, is the Y chromosome.
Right. Correct, because women don't have it. Yes.
Right.
Females don't have it.
So when they were doing that portion, even I read some of that testimony, it's misleading.
It is. It's very misleading.
The way they used it and said that he could not be ruled out is because they basically just ruled in males.
Right. That could have been misconstrued because you turn around and 2 seconds later, his DNA was on the keys. That is not what was said at all.
Right. And that
there was
jury
not
get
any, that is not, but saying he couldn't be ruled out of that versus his DNA was not found. So they couldn't get his DNA profile out of whatever full profiles they were able to pull. Okay. They couldn't do that. They were able to say that the man who found the keys, supposedly, there's even controversy over that, but it doesn't really matter to me. They were able to say his DNA was not on the keys. They did exclude him. So see, they did take the Y chromosome factor further. However, DNA is a very tricky, you need eyes on the testimony, from the prosecutor standpoint or the defendant standpoint. You need unbiased eyes listening to what's happening and saying, okay, now you need to go ask them this because otherwise they're going to understand this, right?
Right.
So because, this case demonstrated that the tech, because they're just being asked questions with regard to the testing they did on what they were given. They have no dog in the fight. They shouldn't have a dog in the fight. And so they answer the questions. And so in not being able to exclude his DNA from the Y chromosome test, you know, that got turned into immediately his DNA's on the keys. And like that, it's not a smoking gun, but like that's a connection that, in my opinion, was not made. Now, another thing is cell phone data. And that came into play here. And they had, now, okay, for starters, in the first trial, the defense did not put on a defense. And sometimes, you know, we are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That is what is stated. And when a defense team feels that the state has not adequately proved their case, they can elect not to put on a defense. I can't speak to if that's a good idea or not, but in this first case, I know they did not put on a defense. And I could see a couple of things that they probably could have maybe refuted, but in a lot of the other witnesses, they were able to basically refute their testimony, like right there with that person. Like they just had to ask the right question.
Yeah, they were refuting most of it on cross.
And so, yeah, defense attorneys are still doing work, even if they don't put on a defense. They just don't call their own witnesses, and they don't. Basically, they're letting the case rest with what the prosecution has presented. Because, you know, when you put a defense on, all the witnesses you call are going to be subjected to the prosecution's cross-examination. And I guess as a defense attorney, you would just have to balance it out and decide. There's a little tiny bit of something to be said for not putting on a defense, but there's a whole lot more, I think, to be said for putting on one. But whatever, it doesn't matter. But the cell phone data was completely misleading. The state's expert witness testifying about what could and could not be derived from the cell phones. Now, I don't think that the witness was intentionally misleading anybody, but they had it like plotted out, and so it was almost like they made it fit what they wanted it to fit. It either fits or it doesn't. It's, you know, the wiggling area, like I can wiggle it and make it work, but guess what? That's not the same thing. So like with the cell phone information, there were certain things that like they knew had happened at certain times, and so they could pinpoint the locations. And if the location, for example, the final resting place of her phone, if it's off location-wise, okay, you know, when she was known to be home that day, if that's off location-wise, so they're just like, well, we'll just shift it over. And they live in a tiny place. I mean, they were like, your cell phone data, you know, your phones are together. And like, there was absolutely no physical evidence to support that claim. None. Like, because so even with the map they put up there, even saying, yeah, we adjusted it a little, you know, to make it work, it's still the data's best guess, first of all, okay, because your phone is giving off a signal. Signals can bounce, signals can skip, signals can do all kinds of things. So there's data interpretation there. And then you've got the analyst interpretation on top of that. Now, they are something that you can glean information from. You can figure like certain things out. It is never 100% guaranteed to be accurate, ever. There are too many factors that come into play. And so I feel like, and you've got investigators telling the defendant, and they have the evidence that his phone was with her phone. Now, I understand that in a normal situation, you would have, if you've got an innocent defendant, most likely that person would say that's, you know, well, that's not true, and they wouldn't cave to that allegation. But it wasn't presented to him in that way. It was presented like, we already know it. Like, there's nothing you can say to refute this. And they don't have to be fair. They don't have to tell the truth. But it went from putting pressure on him to straight up lying, in my opinion.
It did. And the other part of that was where his lies come in. And like, it's interesting because this is one of the first cases that I've seen this happen. And this is sort of a hallmark of false confessions, by the way. He didn't confess, but this is a hallmark of false confessions. That is when you start presenting things with the authority of badge and an indictment, and you start saying that this information points you to here, his story starts shifting around trying to figure out how that's possible. So he starts just sort of saying things that seem to make sense to him. Well, maybe I was with her longer than I realized. Maybe I was there at this time.
Right, and that to them is saying, I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty.
And then they're upset that they've contradicted themselves, and now they've contradicted him. But the only thing that is different in the two is like they have a badge on their side saying that their information must be correct. He was trying to tell them something that just made them shut up.
But he wasn't trying to lie to them.
That's what I mean. He was trying to pacify them. He was being complacent. He wasn't being...
Correct. And so when they're saying, well, your phone's there, we've got proof, and he's going, well, I have no idea why that is. Like, he literally didn't know. And so, but in reality, there is no evidence except what has been conveniently interpreted to be legitimate evidence.
Right.
There's no evidence that that was the case. And I felt like it could have been made clearer to the jury that this is somebody's opinion. And I think that would have had to have been a defense witness. And so maybe they didn't go there because they didn't want to put a defense, because once you put on a defense, you're putting on a defense. And, maybe they just didn't feel like it was valid enough, but it, to me, seemed like you've got normal, everyday people listening to things that are way over their head. And, one of the very first cases that we watched had this type of cell phone fiasco happening.
Yeah.
And that was like a long time ago.
I remember that. And they basically, it was cell phone and Google Maps was what they were using.
Correct. Right. And I watched that, and I watched how the defense and prosecution kind of battled over it. I know that there was a witness that was excluded from being able to testify that should have been allowed to testify. Like, there was a lot of issues in that case too. But I remember thinking to myself, like, there's no way this ends well because of the, like, well-intentioned, however confusing information that was provided. It was too much. And it wasn't made clear. Like, this isn't scientific evidence. This is like, I know a lot about this, and I'm giving information as to my, expert opinion on this. And you would hope that people aren't, I don't feel like the guy giving the testimony, he had legitimate reasons for every single thing he did in his analyzing of the data. And, that was his prerogative. However, I think that without, sort of the balance of that, it's really difficult for the jurors to draw their own conclusion, which that's what you want to happen. You want to say, these are the facts, draw your own conclusion. And, unfortunately, that doesn't happen a whole lot. And the amount of sway put on is, it is necessary most of the time because, jurors are living their lives and they've been plucked to sit and, deal with it's not nonsense because a girl did lose her life, but I would say that there's a lot of cases that are nonsense that don't involve violence or physical harm. But so they do need to be swayed. However, I don't think that the expert testimony that was being put on, I feel like they were getting someone else's conclusion. And so that sort of skipped right over them being given, because they should draw their own conclusions. And I don't feel like, not only that I feel like they didn't do that, but I feel like most people would be incapable of doing that without like substantially more information. And that's where it sort of gets murky, because like if it's really truly evidence, that's great, but like you still need to have it presented in a way where it's factual and conclusions can be drawn without others' interpretations. And that's, I know that's pretty much impossible, because it's not like anybody's going to go through a, cell phone data analysis class on a jury. I mean, that's just not going to happen. But it seems like that just really taints things.
Well, that other case that you mentioned was 8 or 10 years ago. And when I remember I actually physically sat through some of that. I watched the whole thing, but that was one of the first cases locally to me where I had seen blackout of coverage, like clearing the courtroom. So, because at that time they had a bunch of people involved in that case that were dual badged, like they were working FBI and they were working like CART analysis cases, that's like the new, it's the old, like the cell phone activity cases. And, it's interesting that you bring that case up, because that case was kicked and they came back and settled for a second-degree murder plea deal. And, that case was one of the first examples I had ever seen of technology coming into trial. I had seen trials before that, but this was when your computer and your phone started to matter. And it's interesting because we're seeing these cases were 3 or 4 years after that. You bring up this really kind of weird point that it becomes a bit of a contest. And that's a little disturbing considering the makeup of some of the juries I've seen recently.
And I don't want to put jurors down.
No, that's not. But if they're given instructions that have like these loose, open-ended pieces, I mean, as much as it's weird to hear that a jury didn't realize that you had to have a unanimous vote for not guilty, that's not in the pattern instructions. It says for the defendant to be guilty, the vote must be unanimous. That's how things are given to juries. But the whole point of juries, the whole reason they're supposed to work is because they're supposed to be made up of people that are peers in the community. And to some degree,
right. And you have to think, our system of justice, I mean, it goes back a really long time. And it's still premised on, the same reasoning, even that didn't include any sort of, technology. Really, it didn't. And so at the end of the day, it is a contest. And I saw it back in the other case. I saw it very clearly because I thought to myself, like, there is no way to decipher what he's saying. That's what I thought to myself. Like, at that point in time, it was like mind blowing. Well, and to me, it didn't look accurate from the jump. And so I was like, I don't know about that. But now I'm not saying that it's not a tantalizing strategy, because it certainly is a strategy, and probably one that should be used in the event that you're actually trying to convict a guilty person, right? Like if you say, oh, your cell phone was there, and like, it was there, that could sway, right? That could sway you into confessing or whatever. And, if you're guilty, that's fine. And so the other side of that is, how do you prove, no, my phone wasn't there? Like, we quit. And so that's where it gets really difficult. And that's why you have the opportunity to put on a defense. But you're right. The other case did get kicked, and it got kicked specifically because the judge did not allow the defense expert testimony to refute the cell phone evidence. That's exactly why I got kicked.
There were two witnesses they kicked that I felt like should not have been kicked that were related to it because that was a weird trial, not to like completely derail this, but I happen to know one of the witnesses like professionally, and we were all following along on this like alumni board, and I would say there was probably 80 participants because, you know, live streaming trial, and it was like local to this area we were all familiar with, and we had all gone to school around there. So we were all sharing our opinions, but people were like taking screenshots of the judge asleep, and they were doing all sorts of like, you know, childish nonsense on the board. But what we didn't realize was that one of the witnesses, after like he was ruled as not being able to testify, came on the board. He was like, I'm going to watch it now. He's like, I'm a member here. So he started talking. He was like, what they're saying is not even possible. And it's like, it's not that he didn't do it. He's like, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is what the prosecution is presenting and what seems like it makes sense to the jury isn't possible. It's not a thing that's possible.
Right.
Because they were, like, it was
But who's going to say that, though? Oh, wait, he was going to say it until the judge didn't allow him to testify.
Exactly. And that is, I don't know, one of the other cases we talked about this summer was Guy Hines. And, like, I haven't decided if, like, that's going to be coming back up or not, but I do want to mention that, like, that's one of the scariest juries I've ever seen. And I have some other conversations we've had about that case, but it's sort of an example of how, you know, juries are just there to sort of mete out or measure out what's being said between two sides of things. And your phrasing is probably the best phrasing I've heard. That works really well if the prosecution is playing above board and it's a guilty person.
Correct.
But it doesn't work so well if the prosecution is being really broad and open. I'm not even going to call them like corrupt or anything because that's not what goes on. If they're being kind of like open to the possibilities, and I've heard this before, where they get a medical examiner to say, yes, that's a possibility, to something that it is a possibility, but it's highly unlikely. If the defense isn't on their toes, the jury goes away thinking, well, maybe it is him.
Right. And I don't know how fair that is. And I certainly feel like in this case, it was not fair to tell, and see, that's where it gets skewed again, because all I think is, well, guilty people, it's plenty fair. But so if you, this defendant, I would say there's no way he's guilty. Like, so, and that's actually based on, it's not even like an assessment of him. It's an assessment of like the rest of the case. Like, it's just so out there. And so I think that when you're put in a position where you're told, like, this is what it is, and then nobody says this isn't what it is, like, how fair is that? I don't know that that's fair. I don't know that it's fair to juries. I don't know that it's definitely not fair to innocent defendants.
Tried twice for the murder of Jessica Chambers, but both trials ended in a hung jury. And that was, and has, many wondering if Quentin Tellis will be tried for a third time. Local 24 News reporter Tish Clark live in the studio now with new information from the district attorney on this very case. Tish.
Hi, Katina. Well, Quentin Tellis will go back to Monroe, Louisiana sometime this week. He'll face murder charges down there for killing a college exchange student in July 2015. Investigators say the student was tortured before she was stabbed nearly 30 times in her apartment. Tellis denies killing the student. However, he pleaded guilty to using her debit card and was sentenced to 10 years as a habitual offender. Tellis was then extradited here to Mississippi to face murder charges charges in the Jessica Chambers case. As for the Chambers case, District Attorney John Champion says he might take Tellis to trial a third time, but he wants to let emotions simmer down a little bit in Panola County, and he wants to talk to the Chambers family before making any decisions. Champion says if Tellis is convicted of murder in Louisiana, that conviction would be irrelevant in a third trial in the Chambers case.
There is a rule of evidence in Mississippi called 404B that basically says you can't use proof of other crimes to prove that he did this one. I certainly understand the reason behind the rule. You know, we want to be somebody to be convicted on the proof that I have and not proof that he's done a lot of different things in the past, unless I can prove relevance to my case. And it wouldn't be fair to a defendant to do that.
Okay, Tellis also faces a felony drug charge in Louisiana. As a habitual offender, he could get a life sentence for that if that drug charge is brought up in the future. We'll certainly keep you posted on any developments. Live in the studio tonight, Tish Clark, Local 24 News.
And at this point, there's a lot of media out, and I'm going to use some pieces of it so people can hear sort of how much media is out there and how crazy it is. Oxygen did a whole podcast series on this where the first episode is nothing but talking about how ridiculous the social media involvement is. But the people that are involved in the episode are the people who created the mayhem in the first place. And this is all from this little town of 500 people. But Meg had sent me this clip. This one clip stands out to me as like, it sort of tells you so much about how the legal system works for young black males. I'm not getting a lot of credence to it in this case. I'm going to play it, and it's from a weird place. I don't know where it really came from, so I can't pull the audio properly. I'm just going to play a little bit of it because the sentences that are said by this kid are so powerful in the middle of this other, docudrama special about this case that I don't think you'd find them anywhere else. And I think people need to hear this, and if they don't know it, they need to know it. And whether it's true in this case or not, it is true in some cases. And that's how you end up with all of these cases where 10 years later, 20 years later, 25 years later, 40 years later, people are being exonerated because this happens.
Ain't no way I can get 600 pounds of weed in and out of here in a day. Ain't no way.
Quentin Tellis dropped out of school in 8th grade. He's been in and out of jail and prison since then. In fact, Quentin Tellis was released in October 2014, just 2 months before Jessica's murder.
When it all happened and they said Quentin had something to do with it, we was all like, shit, we doubt it, but okay. If that's who they gonna send to prison for, bye. Do I think Quentin had the intelligence to do something like that? No, I don't think the boy came right. And being able to get rid of the evidence by himself, impossible. But I think Quentin will be the fall guy for this because when something lingers in the state of Mississippi, things have to go away real fast. That case became worldwide. It wasn't just some Mississippi case that we can actually sweep under the rug and be quiet. What's going to happen is they're going to give him some time and they're going to forget about him. Case closed, that's out the way now. Somebody went to prison for the murder. But let me say this. You have to be a real dumb black man to burn up a white girl in the state of Mississippi.
Okay, so we say all this, but then at the end of the day, there's been 2 mistrials.
So the system, to some degree, seems to be working. Or people just want to know who the hell Eric is.
Thank goodness Quentin's name's not Eric if he is in fact, not guilty. If he's innocent of this crime, then it's a good thing his name is not Eric or Derek or whatever. So I don't know. I know that the last trial, so the first trial was, I believe, 2015. The second one was 2018. And I don't know if they've announced.
Well, he got indicted. So in March of 2019, the boyfriend got killed. That was in prison. The victim's boyfriend.
He was out when he got killed, right?
Right. Yeah. He got shot and killed. He had a new girlfriend and he was trying to raise his kids. And the guy came to their house, and as he was leaving the house, he turned around and fired a shotgun on him and killed him. So that happens. And then the next piece of the puzzle was they were deciding whether or not they're going to retry Quentin Tellis for the murder of Jessica Chambers. But in the meantime, he's been indicted in Louisiana. And this is like going to get into some dicey territory because so he had already gotten 10 years for using the
access of the device, right?
Right. The access of the device fraud. He used the girl's debit card. And when he did that, he got 10 years. So now they have indicted him for that murder because, Eric doesn't exist and he can't possibly be him. If I were the prosecutor trying to try this again, because I don't know if they've announced that they're going to, I assume that they're going to go for a third bite at the apple here. If they do that, then what I would do is I would call Eric Hill to the stand. And I would be like, this is Eric. Eric and Quentin are best friends. They're going to make you think. Quentin didn't do this, Eric did it. But that's not what happened. This is Eric, and we ruled him out, and here's how. And then you call the cops to the stand to say what they did to rule him out. And, you hope that works. I know that doesn't seem to make sense, but nothing else about this trial makes sense either.
Okay, but are they even there? Because I'm not seeing indications of that anywhere.
No, they're not there either. You mean what do you mean, of a new trial?
No, I'm saying thinking what you just said. Because, that makes perfect sense. This is Eric. Okay. But so why haven't they done that? Because to me...
Because he's guilty.
Okay,
and that's
but
what I don't
it's
understand.
not his trial, though, is my thing. You can go in... Okay, so sometimes the strategy is to pin a crime on another person when you're a defendant, okay? It adequately casts reasonable doubt in a lot of cases to say it was not me, it was this person, okay?
Right.
And, the extent to which that is allowed is very pliable depending on every situation is unique. Some judges, don't let it get that far. Appellate courts overturn it, whatever. But, okay, so having that in mind, where is Eric? I mean, they could have literally brought anybody named Derek or Eric in. It seems most logical they would bring one in that made sense. But they haven't done that. Nobody's done that. And so I don't know. Now, personally, I think it would do both sides some good maybe to get a different person on board because both trials were tried with the same attorneys.
Yeah.
The same prosecutor and the same defense attorneys. Now, I'm not saying they didn't do an adequate job. I mean, because literally, they get up there and they are dealing with what they have to deal with. I mean, that's how it ends up being. And so I don't know what to tell somebody about some of the stuff that comes up during court. I don't know. For example, I actually don't know if it was the first or second trial, but I think it was the first trial. The defense attorney, the male defense attorney, called Jessica Chambers Erica Chambers. And he did that 4 times during his closing statement. And then the prosecutor stands up, says, this is not Erica Chambers, this is Jessica Chambers. I watched it. I caught it. I felt like the defense attorney just got his words mixed up, which is very easy to do in a high-stress situation like that. Because it's stressful for the defense attorneys, too, right? But, how do you come back from that? I mean, it was the closing argument, so he didn't really have to come back from it. But, that left a terrible impression, I'm sure, on the jurors. He can't even remember the victim's name. I don't know how, so what I'm saying is, I guess it wouldn't hurt for some fresh eyes to have a look if they're going to go through with it a third time. And your strategy about calling Eric to the stand, okay, well, yeah. And so I guess that's part of what's so confusing about this to me is why hasn't any of this stuff happened? Because I honestly I looked into the case, it came up, and I don't do these kind of cases, but there was something about it. And then when I started, actually, this is a perfect illustration of why I don't do these kind of cases. They are infuriating. You've got a terrible crime, and then you've got a terrible thing happening in the prosecution of it. And, you know, you said, well, this proves to an extent our system works. Well, is putting someone like Quentin through, you know, possibly 3 trials, who knows what else is going to happen before it comes to some sort of end? Is that really the system working? If not, where is that failure occurring? And so, you know, that's obviously more of like a manufacturing approach to it. But I feel like he's been through an awful lot if he is an innocent person. And it has done nothing to bring justice to Jessica's killer. Now, why hasn't he accepted a plea deal?
That's interesting.
Well, I'm just saying because
I mean, he doesn't have anything to do for 10 years anyways.
Most cases, okay, well, that's one way to look at it, but most cases that I feel like could end up like this, the reason they don't is because the defendant ultimately takes a plea deal, and then all this is over.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay, so, you know, in taking that into consideration, so, you know, why hasn't he taken a plea deal? Which, yeah, I mean, I guess it could be a really good strategy because while he's, you know, I think he's back in Louisiana, right?
He's in Louisiana right now. He's in a local jail there awaiting trial for the exchange student murder.
But, so basically they could say like, oh, well, we know he's killed this other girl and we're just waiting for enough evidence to.
So he was indicted first for Jessica Chambers. And then he pled out the same year. He pled out in May of that year. So that's February of 2016 that he was indicted.
But hold on. They had to bring him back from Louisiana to try him.
Right. Okay. That's what I'm saying. So February, they indicted him in Mississippi.
And where was he?
He ended up going over to Louisiana. He was indicted in Mississippi, and in May of 2016, he pleaded guilty to the credit card use, the access of a device fraud. And then he was, the first time that he was tried was in October 2017. That was a mistrial because of the confusing jury instructions.
Well, even when they got the instructions right, they still didn't come to a conclusion. So,
right. So then the second trial is where they bring in the experts saying that like you can't possibly have been speaking or whatever. So that trial was October 2018. That's the second trial.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean he's been hanging out in Louisiana. It looks like he's been in some of the local jails, but Wachita Correctional Center in Monroe, Louisiana is where he's been held a lot of this time.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter because now, hold on. So now they've also indicted him in the murder where he was up for the access device. Like it's the same person.
No, he had already pled that out. And so, okay, so that's the holdup on the third trial for this. They figured they'd let Louisiana give it a go.
Right.
For her murder. Now, what is different? What happened before that they only got him on access device to now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
So yeah, that's something I'm interested to know. I feel like it will be a disappointing answer. I don't know. I shouldn't say that, but I don't see what could have possibly changed. Did they find more evidence? Are they just feeling like, you know, and okay, so some of the overtones that have been cast on this case, I think it's a little, I think that in any case, anywhere, you're going to find that, you know, a young, pretty girl that gets killed by a male of any sort it's going to be a problem. But the racist part is a little more here.
Well, yeah, it's pretty easy. It should be pretty easy to get a conviction in this case in the system today because of those factors. And I'm not saying that other than that's how it works. that's just how it goes with most jury trials, and it sorts itself out on appeal. You know, it's kind of like in the movie industry, they'll fix it in post when somebody screws up. Well, in the industry that is our court system, they fix it on appeal sometimes. But
sometimes it goes unfixed forever.
Well, there's this interesting, I think you sent me a version of this clip, but there's this clip on the oxygen stuff where this guy says, I don't know who it is. It's one of the people talking about this case, young black man, and he has two interesting comments he makes. One is, you have to be really stupid or really dumb to kill a white girl by setting her on fire in Mississippi. That's one of the comments he makes. It's really interesting and telling to me.
It's actually more like you have to be really dumb to be a black man to set a white girl on fire.
Right. You're right. That's how he says it. And it is an interesting perspective because he also says, oh, well, if he's the one going to prison this time, okay.
Bye.
Yeah, he says bye. And I was just like, wow. Because
But, okay, so in addition to that, when they heard about them saying that it was Quentin that did it, they were like, I doubt it. And then he said, him doing it by himself, getting rid of all the evidence, impossible.
Yeah,
that's his exact word.
That's the other quote I was going to ask you about. That is exactly what I was thinking of.
Impossible.
Because they know, like the family knows and the people there know, and the cops have to know that Quentin Tellis is highly unlikely that he was smart enough to do this. That's the end of this particular case.
Capable of doing it.
Right. And we are coming up on 1:40. So if you have words,
oh my God!
If you have words to wrap this one up, this is a lot to edit right now. So.
Well, I hope I find some clarity on this because it's very I can't even explain what it is as far as I don't want to say like disenchantment or I don't know this one is infuriating and I don't know who killed Jessica Chambers, but I feel like this spinning wheel that they have going here is not getting her justice. And I don't see where it's gone wrong because it's readily apparent in reviewing the facts. I think it's readily apparent. And I think it's very frustrating to me to kind of come across this case and then like look at it and then say, because, a lot of times stuff goes wrong, but then you've got somebody that comes along and sort of rights part of the wrong, and then it sort of starts all falling into place. Now, that doesn't always happen, but it is definitely not happening here. And I guess my problem is, like, I don't see why. Why is it not happening? Why is nobody saying, well, let's get the right person charged with this?
I think part of it is they don't know who the defendant is. The investigation sort of settled on him, and they're sort of done with it. And I don't think he's a good fit for what they're looking for.
Why don't they realize that, though?
I don't know. Because
it's got to be. I think it's because he's a young black man. I feel like they just said, "Oh, any of them will do." Just like the commenter about it being impossible for him to have done that. He said, "Oh, well, it's your turn. You're going to jail for it. Bye."
If you bring in Eric and put Eric on the stand from the prosecution side, or if from the defense perspective, you were able to get a really good forensic psychological examination done of Quentin, I think that they would find that it's highly unlikely that he's capable of it, and that there's probably something going on there that would probably prevent it, unless I'm missing something huge that they found. I do think in their little cast of characters, they have the Eric that did this, and they could easily try them.
I hope so. I hope you're correct. I just want to add one more thing that I found just absolutely, it's very compelling to me. Look into this case and, see for yourself. But Quentin Tellis's attorneys are not appointed. They are attorneys that his family hired to defend him? Because they have spent a fortune.
Oh, absolutely. If they're on the second trial.
And they don't have, it's not like they live in a very modest type home, and, they don't have these like expendable resources. So that's another thing that I observe, take into consideration. They got him at least one attorney, and I don't know if they hired both of them or if the two just worked together and they hired one. But that's a lot. That's saying a lot.
It is, and that's another part of the justice system that I don't think people understand, because one of the goals of the prosecution in situations like that is to
deplete resources.
Bankrupt the resources. Yeah, that's the goal. And they will never say that, but that is always the goal, because the state can allocate, more and more if they need to, and it's not real money to them. It's not bread off the table. It's budgetary that they don't necessarily see it. Their bosses might, and there's people in the revenue department that do, but whatever budget they have set for the year is made to be able to do that. And you can bury them in paperwork because you've got a staff to do it. I will just end it with, it's a shame that cases like this can go 2 and 3 trials long, and that the resources can be wasted on them, because it clogs up the court system too.
Correct. I agree 100%. I feel like it's very unfair.
But I do want to ask one last question. If you're going to railroad somebody, why Quentin Tellis? Why not somebody named Eric?
Eric.
Yeah, why not?
For the love of everything, why not any of them? I'm not even saying they have to even pick the guy I'm saying. To me, that doesn't make sense.
I know, that's the part that makes me think that they're playing a game, because, well, obviously we've put this case on.
It makes me think that they have no idea.
I just don't understand. If you're going to close a case, and it's going to go to trial, and you've got to, basically they view these defendants as being obstinate. I don't think Quentin Tellis is necessarily being obstinate. And maybe there's something there that we don't know about, but I've read stuff about him that cops and prosecutors have said that really bothers me. That he's as dangerous as they come, and all these other things. I don't think he was doing much of anything. I think
I agree. I may be wrong, and he's fooled me if that's the case, but I feel like he's been hanging out with the wrong people.
I absolutely think that he's been hanging out with the wrong people, and I think that these prosecutors are so disconnected from the communities they're prosecuting that they have no business doing this job.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I say that not from a personal standpoint, but from just any prosecutor doing something like that really shouldn't do it. It's bad, and it really has a big effect that goes far beyond Jessica not getting justice and Quentin going into his 3rd trial for her murder.
And I will end it there. And I'll drop a bunch of links in the show notes. If you'd like to hear more about the Jessica Chambers case, then I'll point you in the right direction. Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LabrottieCreations.com. Check out the merchandise, and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, LabrottieCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And we'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
there's this other case down there that I was wondering about why people didn't put the resources into it. And it happens like, you know, I don't want to say the same time because it's not accurate, but like it happens in the same general time frame, within a year, I think. And nobody jumped on that same bandwagon. And I think it's weird, but it's the missing girl, Rebecca Paulks. I mean, and at this point, people are starting to cover Rebecca Paulks' case. And, you know, it's sort of covered in small ways along the way, but there was no group that I could find with hundreds of thousands of members for Rebecca Paulk.
Between Tabitha Tutors and the Oklahoma case with Gloria and Ashley, and then the Cindy Sutherland case, I thought something was going to break this week and I would have an interesting update, but I do not. And that's really kind of sad. But then I have the craziest U.S. Marshals task force update. And I was like, what? They apparently had a 2-week operation where they found 39 missing kids. And I'm not saying this is dubious or anything like that. It just is reported kind of weirdly.
Fox 5 was given unprecedented access to a rescue mission performed during a missing child operation in Georgia. It's a look behind the scenes like you've never seen before. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Tom Haynes.
I'm Courtney Bryant. 39 children are now safe tonight after an extensive operation by the U.S. Marshals Service. Authorities identified 15 of the children as victims of sex trafficking.
Operation Not Forgotten focused on locating and rescuing endangered missing children in Metro Atlanta and Macon earlier this month.
Fox 5 cameras were on the ground with marshals for 2 days as they carried out this critical mission. As Fox 5's Claire Sims reports, it also resulted in the arrests of several adults.
According to the U.S. Marshals Service, right now there are more than 400,000 missing children across the United States. And of those, more than 90% are runaways believed to be in danger.
He does come to this location. His friend and his friend's mother lives here.
Our cameras had unprecedented access this month as U.S. Marshals tracked down dozens of missing and endangered children in North Georgia in Operation Not Forgotten.
Just be very careful.
This is a relatively new mission for the Marshals Service after the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act in 2015 gave them the authority to help federal, state, and local law enforcement recover missing children.
We're really good at what we do. We're, they've called us manhunters, where we're not just manhunters anymore. We also help save and rescue children as well.
All right, but I'm gonna help you up, okay?
Over the course of the 2-week effort, marshals rescued 26 children and safely located 13 more, ranging from 17 years old to as young as 3. Director of the U.S. Marshals Service, Donald Washington, says this is a priority for them.
I have children. I'm sure many of you do as well. These are not my kids, right? And these are not your kids, but actually they are our kids when it's all said and done.
Enforcement arrested 9 adults as part of the operation, including 2 in Newton County. Travante Sharif, who was charged with interference of child custody, and Kirk Waters, who was arrested while in the company of a missing child. According to the Marshals Service, they identified 15 of those missing children as victims of sex trafficking. And working with the Georgia Attorney General's Office and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, law enforcement helped get those children into rehabilitation programs.
Our goal is to recover children that are in a unhealthy situation and get them a better future, and that's the best we can do. That's all we can hope for.
Director Washington says he wants missing children and their families to know that they will never stop looking for them. In Atlanta, Claire Sims, Fox 5 News.
One of the priorities for the police department over the past 17 years is to attempt to determine what happened to Tabitha Tutors on April 29th of 2003. Her family deserves nothing less. Her family needs closure. The family needs to know what happened. Over the past 17 years, we have worked a number of leads locally and, frankly, across the country. The FBI has been our partner in this investigation for a number of years. Recent information has led us to this 6-acre piece of property here in Hickman County. The information, without going into a great amount of detail, is that she may have been on this property in the 2003 timeframe. So, members of the police department's homicide cold case unit, our urban search and rescue team, and a team from the FBI is working the property now, looking for any evidence that would indicate that Tabitha Tudors was here in 2003.
What exactly let you guys hear?
I really can't discuss in great detail the information that we have, but over the years, information has come to our attention that has been investigated. Some of that information was recently supplemented with new detail, and that new detail has resulted in the police department, the FBI, coming to Hickman County today to search this property. A search warrant was granted locally, and we are here pursuant to a search warrant, working the property, looking for any evidence that Tabitha Tudors had been here.
Do you have any idea how long you guys might be out here?
I believe it will be more than one day. We will not wrap this up today. It will be more than one day.
Have you talked to anybody from her family?
Oh, the police department and the FBI have been in constant contact with the Tudors family recently and over the years.
Woke up with a cloud over my windowsill. Some days I swear the weatherman is out for me. I've been locked inside thinking about sunlight. Woke up with a thought, maybe it's all for now. Maybe it's all for now. The highs and lows get me, you see. I'm just not into it. Broke down, exposed now. With low clouds, there's nothing to cover me. There's nothing to cover me. Think back to the times when the sky was clear. I had visions of launching to the atmosphere. Now here on the ground, waiting for departure. Think back to the day before the colors fade. The highs and the lows get me, you see. I'm just not into this. I'm broke down, exposed now. With low clouds, there's nothing to cover me. There's nothing to cover me. When will the rain stop falling? When will I see the sun again, sun again? When will the rain stop falling? When will I see the sun again, sun again? The sun again. The highs and the lows get me, you see. I'm just not into it. I'm broke down, exposed now. With low clouds, there's nothing to cover.